Hello and welcome to Daily Records. And today's Daily Record is the debut album by eccentric American recording artist Van Dyke Parks' Song Cycle. This was released in December of 1967 on the Warner Brothers label. And there are 3 cover songs on here, but the album was written and composed by Van Dyke Parks. And the production is credited to Lenny Waronker, who went on to become the president of Warner Brothers Records. Now, the thing about Van Dyke Parks, he is a interesting guy, and a lot of people know Van Dyke as the collaborator with Brian Wilson, the lyrics to Smile. And fans of the Beach Boys know kind of the story that Smile had these sort of interesting idiosyncratic lyrics that Mike Love had a lot of issues with, and Van Dyke Parks was sort of unceremoniously booted from the Smile project that later collapsed. Now, it would be great to report that Song Cycle it just picks up where Smile leaves off, in that it's this sort of nutty adventure album, but it is a nutty Americana album. It opens with Vine Street, the Randy Newman song. But the record is just, it's a wild showcase of Van Dyke Parks and his interesting, unconventional song structures. But the album, sort of like Smile, it focuses on American history and culture. And particularly, Van Dyke has a history of working with the film and music industry in Southern California. And but it's not an album of just these sort of catchy pop songs. It's definitely one that takes on this sort of different view of Americana. And it's gone on. It's reached a cult status and become sort of one of the great sort of cult albums of the 60s. Now, mine is a Sundazed issue. Of course, it recreates the Warner Brothers gold logo, but it's got my Sundazed Beat Rocket inner sleeve. But just to have a good clean copy. But as far as albums in 1967, it's quite interesting. Van Dyke said that a lot of it was recorded before Sgt. Pepper, and that's probably true. And of course, Sgt. Pepper just opened the doors for sort of people to get experimental and to reach out and to try these sort of different things. One of my favorites is a song called "Public Domain," credited to Van Dyke Parks. It's sort of a just an interesting thing. Of course, there is also a song called Van Dyke Parks that is credited to Public Domain. So Van Dyke just has this just sort of odd sense of humor, and his musical stamp is just full of like accordions and strings, and he's very detailed in everything that he does, which is what makes him such an interesting artist. Now, the album came out, and a lot of people, it was critically acclaimed. A lot of people felt like it was one of the great albums of that year. But after it, didn't sell very much. I mean, it kind of makes sense of why this album wouldn't sell. It's just not an accessible album for listeners. But the Warner Brothers ran a full-page ad in newspapers, and it said they lost $35,509 on the album of the year. And it said, the album went on to say that people that actually bought this album had likely worn their copies out by playing it over and over, and they suggested that listeners send in worn-out copies to Warner Brothers, and they would get 2 new copies. Including one copy to replace the worn out one and one to educate a friend with. But Van Dyke was not amused by this, and he felt like Warner Brothers was trying to kill his career. Now, there were positive reviews that were reprinted in these ads, and the great one, Rolling Stone, Van Dyke Parks may come to be considered as the Gertrude Stein of the new pop music. But, the album has grown in stature, cult statuses. I mean, this is a cult album through and through. And guys like Jim O'Rourke, singer and songwriter, producer, he worked with Van Dyke, Joanna Newsom, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have albums in your collection with Van Dyke involved, doing some of the arrangements. Van Dyke has just this incredible knack for detail. Now, that's my Sunday's copy. I actually do have the Record Store Day mono release, so I have 2 copies of this. But I find it to be just an interesting album. No, it's not one that you're just going to put on and immediately it's going to grab you with sort of these hooky, pop melodies. But it is an album that you can put on and sort of absorb it, and it goes into so many places and it takes you on so many adventures musically. Van Dyke is just an all-around interesting artist to chew on, and this album is no exception. Song Cycle by Van Dyke Parks, today's daily record. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, TommyBurton75. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Tell me what you think about Song Cycle. I love hearing from you guys. But in the meantime, I'll see you all again tomorrow with another daily record.